When I checked my credit report last month, there was a mortgage in my name for a cabin hundreds of miles away. I've never bought property. I called the loan company and they said, "Congratulations on 10 years of ownership." But when I searched the address online, the property listing says, "Owner unknown, access denied." It started out as a normal, boring task. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, trying to get ahead on my adult responsibilities list for once in my life. One of those tasks? Check my credit report. Not because I was suspicious of anything, mostly just because every financial blog and podcast keeps screaming about how important it is to monitor your credit. I figured it would be boring. A few student loans, my old car lease, my one and only credit card. End of story. Except it wasn't. Scrolling down the report, something immediately jumped out at me. A mortgage, in my name, opened 10 years ago, for a property located somewhere I'd never even heard of, a town hundreds of miles away, deep into the forested parts of the state. My stomach dropped. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe someone stole my identity? Maybe the credit bureau mixed up my file with someone else's? But the loan was attached to my full legal name, my current address, my real social security number. All of it matched me. And the kicker? The mortgage had been paid consistently for 10 years. On time. Never late. I sat there for a few minutes, staring at the screen, heart hammering against my ribs. Whoever opened this account wasn't just using my name. They were maintaining it, building my credit with it, which made zero sense if it was identity theft. Why boost my score instead of wrecking it? Against my better judgment, I called the loan company. After a few rings, a chipper woman answered, "Thank you for calling Fairmount Lending. How can I assist you today?" I stumbled through an explanation, trying to sound casual, like I was just reviewing my files. She asked for my information, name, date of birth, social security number. I gave it to her, feeling my palms grow slick with sweat. There was a long pause on the other end. And then she said, bright and cheerful as you please, "Congratulations on 10 years of ownership." I almost dropped the phone. Sorry, I stammered. "What exactly am I the owner of?" She rattled off an address. I typed it into my laptop with trembling fingers. The address pulled up almost nothing. No Zillow listing, no photos, no public records I could easily access. Just a vague blurb from a third-party real estate site. Secluded property, owner unknown, access denied. That was it. No price. No history. No details. Just those 3 chilling words. Owner, unknown, access denied. My mouth went dry. The woman on the phone was still talking, something about escrow accounts and anniversary promotions, but I barely heard her. I muttered a thank you, hung up, and just sat there staring at the blinking cursor in the search bar. This wasn't a clerical error. This wasn't identity theft. This was something much, much worse. Something tied directly to me. I checked my old emails. Bank records. Texts from 10 years ago. Nothing. No mention of buying a property. No strange deposits or withdrawals. But a sick feeling gnawed at my gut. 10 years ago, I did have a gap. A short period where things are hazy. I chalked it up to stress at the time. A bad job, a bad breakup, a few weeks where everything felt like it blurred together. But now I wasn't so sure. What if something had happened back then? Something I couldn't remember? What if someone had made sure I wouldn't? The cabin, whatever it was still out there, still in my name, waiting. And if someone went to this much trouble to hide it, I had to ask myself, was I supposed to find it now? Or was I supposed to stay as far away as possible? I didn't sleep much that night. I kept refreshing the real estate listing as if new information would magically appear at 3 a.m. It never did. Just those same cold words. Owner unknown, access denied. It was maddening. I mean, think about it. How can you own something, legally, in every official document, and at the same time be listed as unknown? It didn't make sense. None of this did. The next morning, fueled by too much coffee and too little sleep, I dove deeper. First, I tried public property records for the county where the cabin was supposedly located. Most counties have online databases where you can look up ownership records, tax information, all that boring bureaucratic stuff. But when I searched for the address, nothing. Literally nothing. No registered owner, no parcel number, no tax history. It was like the property officially didn't exist, and yet somehow A bank thought I'd been making mortgage payments on it for a decade. I called the county recorder's office, hoping for some explanation. After 20 minutes on hold, I got a woman who sounded like she was already done with her day, even though it was 9 a.m. I gave her the address. There was a long pause. Then she said, "Sir, that property is restricted." "Restricted how?" I asked. Another pause. "I'm not authorized to access details on restricted holdings," she said, like she was reading off a script. "If you have questions, you'll need to submit a formal inquiry through legal counsel." Legal counsel? For my own property? I thanked her. Or maybe just hung up, I honestly can't remember, and sat there staring at the silent phone in my hand. Something was very, very wrong. I thought about hiring a lawyer. I even Googled a few names. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt wrong to bring in outsiders. If this was some kind of official screw-up, a paperwork mess, sure, a lawyer would help. But if this was something else, something someone wanted buried, I didn't want to endanger anyone else. Not yet. Not until I knew more. I decided to try satellite view. If nothing else, maybe I could at least see what the cabin looked like. Google Maps took forever to load. The area was so remote the images were patchy, low-res. But eventually there it was, surrounded by dense forest, miles from the nearest town. A long dirt driveway snaking through the trees, ending in a small clearing. And in the clearing, a cabin. Dark roof, small front porch. No visible vehicles. No signs of life. The image was dated about 6 months ago. No updates since. I zoomed in as far as I could. There was something odd about the clearing around the cabin. The trees were off, not cut down, more like they had been burned back. A wide blackened ring around the cabin, as if someone had set a controlled fire to clear the land and then never cleaned it up. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting. At the edge of the clearing, right where the trees thickened again, there was a structure, or part of one. Just the suggestion of something half hidden under the canopy. A second building. A shed? A bunker? There were no roads leading to it. No paths, just that lonely, rotting cabin and whatever secrets the forest was trying to swallow. For a few minutes, I just sat there, heart pounding, trying to tell myself it wasn't that strange. Old properties often have outbuildings. Sheds, hunting cabins, root cellars. Perfectly normal. Perfectly harmless. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The prickling on the back of my neck. The sense that I was looking at something I wasn't meant to see. Something that didn't want to be found. The decision crystallized in my mind before I even realized it. I had to go. I had to see it for myself. Because if I didn't, if I just sat here, pretending none of this was happening, I knew it would gnaw at me forever. And maybe worse. Maybe it would catch up to me in ways I couldn't anticipate. I booked a cheap rental car, packed a duffel bag with essentials, flashlight, bottled water, first aid kit, extra batteries, a few tools. Told myself I was being cautious. Prepared. Told myself a lot of things. None of it helped. Because deep down, I already knew. I wasn't just visiting a random piece of forgotten property. I was going back to something. Something I had forgotten, or had been made to forget. And whatever was waiting for me in that cabin, it had been waiting a long time. I couldn't leave right away. The rental car wouldn't be ready for pickup until the next morning. And honestly, part of me was relieved to have a few more hours to prepare. To stall. To second-guess everything. Instead of packing and repacking my bag like a paranoid lunatic, I decided to do something productive. I decided to dig. If I was heading out to confront whatever was waiting for me at that cabin, I wanted to know as much as possible beforehand. I started by pulling out my personal records. Not much to go through. I'm not exactly the most organized person, but I had a shoebox crammed with old paperwork stuffed in the back of my closet. Tax returns, medical forms, apartment leases. 10 years' worth of official adult life, give or take. I sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through it piece by piece. And that's when I found the first crack, a hospital intake form, dated almost exactly 10 years ago. It listed a 2-night stay for observation following neurological incident. The diagnosis box was left vague. Possible TBI, traumatic brain injury, cause undetermined. I blinked at it, trying to make sense of what I was reading. I had no memory of this. None. I knew I'd had some medical stuff around that time. A flu that knocked me out for a week. Maybe a minor concussion when I slipped on ice. But nothing serious enough to warrant hospitalization. At least that's what I thought. But here it was in black and white. 2 nights. No visitors listed. Discharge with limited memory recall. Limited memory recall. I sat back, heart hammering. Had I blacked something out? Or had someone helped me forget? I flipped to the next document, hand suddenly less steady. An old bank statement. Charges from around the same time. One in particular caught my eye. A hotel about 50 miles from the town where the cabin was located. A hotel I had no memory of ever visiting. The charge wasn't huge, just a night or two, but it stood out because it was so out of place. At that time in my life, I was scraping by. I didn't have money for random trips. Why would I have stayed in some no-name motel in the middle of nowhere? Unless it had something to do with the cabin. Unless someone else had taken me there. Unless I had gone willingly and then forgotten. I kept digging. Old emails scanned into a forgotten folder on my laptop. Most were spam or boring updates from streaming services. But buried among them, dated almost exactly 10 years ago, was a single strange message. No sender name, no subject line, just a body of text that read, "Don't forget, you chose this." And nothing else. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, the words burning into my brain. Don't forget, you chose this. But I had forgotten. Completely. And if I had chosen something, what the hell had it been? I felt like I was standing on the edge of a massive sinkhole, the ground cracking and shifting under my feet. Every new discovery made things worse, not better. More confusing. More terrifying. And yet one thing was becoming horrifyingly clear. Whatever had happened to me 10 years ago wasn't just some accident. It wasn't a glitch in the paperwork. It was deliberate, planned, executed. Someone, maybe multiple someones, had gone to incredible lengths to make sure I lived my life without remembering, without asking, without searching. Until now. I glanced at the clock. 2:42 a.m. Just a few more hours until sunrise. Just a few more hours until I picked up the car. Until I pointed it toward a place I technically owned but had never seen. Toward a past I wasn't supposed to recover. I packed the last few things into my duffel bag. Flashlight, notebook, the hospital form and bank statement. And almost as an afterthought, I grabbed a small folding knife from the kitchen drawer and slipped it into the side pocket. Not because I thought I'd need it, but because something deep inside me, something primal, whispered that whatever was waiting for me at the cabin wasn't going to let me leave easily. And if it came to that, I wanted to be ready. The drive to the cabin took longer than I expected. The first few hours were fine. Open highways, endless rows of farmland flashing past my window. But as I got closer to the address, the landscape changed. Civilization thinned out. Towns got smaller, then disappeared entirely. Gas stations turned into a rare sight, the last one I passed looking half abandoned itself. The roads narrowed. Pavement turned to cracked asphalt, then to packed dirt. My cell signal flickered and died somewhere along the way, and with it went my last tether to the world I knew. It was just me, the rental car, and the slow, creeping sense of dread growing heavier with every mile. When I finally turned down the last road, if you could even call it a road, I almost missed it. A barely visible trail branching off into the trees, no signs, no markers. Just a worn path, as if someone had driven it enough times to leave scars in the earth. I hesitated for a moment, heart pounding, then eased the car onto it. The trees closed in fast, their branches arching overhead like a tunnel. Even though it was early afternoon, the light dimmed, shadows stretching long across the path. The car jostled and bounced over roots and potholes. Branches scraped against the windows like fingernails. I kept driving. Because after everything I'd found, the hospital forms, the email, the mortgage, I had to know. I had to see it. The trees thinned suddenly, and I broke into a clearing. I slammed the brakes without meaning to. There it was, the cabin. Just like the satellite images. Small, weathered. Dark wooden siding stained gray with age. A sagging porch. A battered metal mailbox leaning drunkenly on its post long since emptied. No vehicles. No smoke from the chimney. No lights, just silence. The clearing around it was exactly as I'd seen. A blackened ring where the trees seemed scorched or cut back. Something about that space, that circle, made my skin crawl. It wasn't natural. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. I killed the engine and stepped out of the car. The air smelled different here. Not just of pine and damp earth, but something acrid beneath it. Old smoke. Rust. The ground crunched under my boots as I walked toward the cabin. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to get back in the car, to drive until the road ran out. But I kept going, because deep down I knew. I had already crossed whatever invisible line separated me from the life I used to know. There was no going back. The front door was locked, as expected. A heavy, rusted deadbolt. I knocked anyway. Because, honestly, it felt wrong not to. The sound echoed hollowly inside. No answer. I tried the windows next. Most were boarded up from the inside, planks nailed hastily but firmly across the frames. I circled the cabin, scanning every inch, and that's when I found it. On the far side, tucked low to the ground, was a basement window. It wasn't boarded, wasn't locked, just slightly ajar, as if someone had forgotten about it, or wanted it left that way. The opening was small, barely wide enough for me to squeeze through. I crouched down, heart hammering, and peered inside. Darkness. A concrete floor. What looked like a staircase leading up into the main house. And something else. Movement? Or just my imagination? I hesitated. Then, gritting my teeth, I pushed the window open wider and slid through. The air inside was freezing, thick with the smell of damp earth and mildew. My boots scraped against the concrete as I landed awkwardly. For a moment, I just stood there, flashlight in hand, breathing hard, ears straining for any sound. Nothing. Just the distant creaking of wood settling above me. I shone the light around. The basement was mostly empty, just piles of rotting cardboard boxes, a rusted water heater, a broken washing machine covered in cobwebs. No signs of life. No furniture. No food. But something about the place felt used. Not lived in exactly, but visited. Maintained. I made my way carefully to the staircase. Each step groaned under my weight, but somehow held. At the top was another door. Unlike the front door, this one wasn't locked. I pushed it open slowly, wincing at the loud creak. The main floor was just as empty. A single room, kitchen, living space, and what might have been a bedroom all crammed together. No electricity. No plumbing that I could see. An old wood stove. A battered cot shoved against one wall. On the table, coated in a thin layer of dust, sat a few scattered objects. A cracked coffee mug, a rusted lantern, a bundle of yellowed papers tied with twine, and something else. A notebook. It lay open, face down. I reached out, flipped it over carefully. The pages were filled with writing, tight, messy handwriting that looked painfully familiar. My handwriting. I staggered back, heart slamming into my ribs. How? How could that be possible? I had never been here before. I had no memory of this place. And yet here it was. Evidence. Proof. Something inside me had lived here, or been forced to. 10 years ago. Maybe longer. Maybe still. I picked up the notebook, hands trembling, and flipped to the last written page. The words were scrawled hastily, unevenly, like they'd been written under duress. Remember the deal. Do not return to the city. Stay hidden. If they find you again, run. I stared at it, the words swimming in front of my eyes. The deal. Stay hidden. If they find you, run. The cabin creaked around me, the silence suddenly heavy, oppressive. For the first time since this nightmare started, I realized I wasn't uncovering something old. I was disturbing something that was still alive. Still watching, still waiting, and whatever they were, whoever had left these messages for me, they knew I was here now, and they might already be on their way. I couldn't stay in the open. The creaking, the weight of the silence. It felt like the cabin itself was breathing around me, aware of my presence. I stuffed the notebook into my bag, wiped the dust off my hands, and moved deeper into the cabin. The layout was simple, barely 2 rooms in the basement, but something nagged at me. The proportions felt wrong. Too much space unaccounted for. Too much floor between the kitchen and the back wall for there not to be something. I knocked gently along the walls, half expecting nothing. But about halfway down the far wall, I heard it. A different sound. Not the solid thud of drywall, a hollow echo. I pressed my palm flat against the wood. There. A hidden seam. Almost invisible under layers of grime and old paint. A door. No handle. Just a narrow indentation where a hand might fit. I slipped my fingers into the gap and pulled. Nothing. I braced my foot against the baseboard and yanked harder. The panel groaned, resisting, then gave way suddenly with a snap of breaking wood. Behind it, a narrow set of stairs descended into darkness. Not a basement, something else. Deeper. Older. A second level, hidden below even the visible basement. I hesitated, flashlight shaking slightly in my grip. Every part of my body screamed at me to leave it alone. But something stronger, curiosity, stubbornness, desperation, pushed me forward. The stairs were steeper than they should have been, barely wide enough for my shoulders. I moved carefully, one step at a time, the beam of my flashlight cutting thin slices through the gloom. The air grew colder with each step. Heavier. At the bottom, the stairwell opened into a small room. Concrete walls, a single metal chair bolted to the floor, a thick rusted chain dangling from the ceiling, and covering one entire wall. Photographs, hundreds of them, taped, pinned, nailed into the concrete. Most were black and white. Some were Polaroids. All of them were of me. I stumbled back a step, bile rising in my throat. Different ages, different places. Me as a teenager, sitting at a bus stop. Me at a coffee shop, staring at my laptop. Me walking through a grocery store, oblivious to the camera capturing every move. There were even ones from my supposed hospital stay. A shot of me lying in a bed, tubes in my arms, eyes open but empty. I forced myself to look closer. In almost every photo, somewhere in the background, there was a figure. Sometimes just a blur, sometimes a shadow. Sometimes clearer, a man in a dark jacket, always just far enough away to escape recognition. Watching. Waiting. Recording. Pinned in the center of the wall, larger than the rest, was a different picture. Not a surveillance shot. An old group photo. Maybe 30 people standing in front of a building I didn't recognize. Everyone smiling. Everyone relaxed. And standing in the very front row, me, younger, maybe 20, smiling like I belonged there. At the bottom, someone had scrawled, "Original line status, preserved, subject compliant." My hands trembled. The memories clawed at the edge of my mind, blurry, half-formed like something glimpsed through fogged glass. Snippets, faces I didn't know but felt familiar. Words I didn't remember saying. Decisions I didn't remember making. I staggered back from the wall, gasping for air. What the hell was this? Some kind of surveillance program? Some twisted protection scheme? Or something worse? I didn't know. But whoever had orchestrated this, whoever had built this place, they had been watching me for a long, long time. And not as an enemy, as an asset. As something to be monitored, preserved, controlled. Suddenly I heard it. A sound upstairs. The faint creak of floorboards shifting under weight. Someone was in the cabin. I snapped my flashlight off, plunging the room into darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard it hurt. I pressed myself against the wall, ears straining. Another step. Closer. The slow, deliberate movement of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Not searching. Hunting. For me. There was no way out except back up the narrow stairs. No windows. No hidden exits. I was trapped. I fumbled silently for anything I could use, anything to defend myself, but all I found was an old metal pipe lying in the corner. I gripped it tightly, every muscle tense. The steps creaked again. Then a shadow blocked the stairwell. A figure, standing there, silent, waiting, watching. And in that moment, deep in my bones, I realized, whoever they were, they knew me, maybe better than I knew myself. For a moment, we both just stood there. Me hidden in the shadows with a rusted pipe clutched in my hand. Them, silhouetted in the narrow stairwell, motionless, almost casual. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The air was thick, electric with tension. My mind raced through every option, none of them good. Run? Fight? Beg? You're not supposed to be here. The voice was low, calm, almost disappointed. Not angry. Not surprised. As if this was inevitable. As if they'd been waiting for me to find my way back. I tightened my grip on the pipe, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. "Who are you?" I demanded, voice shaking. A small laugh, almost bitter. "I'm the one who kept you safe," they said. "The one who gave you a second chance." Another step back. "I suggest you leave now before you remember too much." And just like that, the shadow was gone. I heard the faint creak of the front door opening, the quiet crunch of footsteps retreating across the clearing. Then silence. I stayed frozen in place for another minute, maybe more. trying to process, trying to decide if this was some kind of trap. But eventually, survival instincts took over. I shoved the pipe into my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and bolted up the stairs. The main floor was empty. The front door hung slightly ajar, the clearing beyond bathed in the sickly gray light of late afternoon. No sign of anyone. No vehicles. No movement. It was like the figure had dissolved into the trees. I slammed the door shut, jammed an old chair under the knob, and sagged against the wall, gasping for breath. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unzip my bag. I needed answers. And there was only one place left to look. The notebook. I pulled it out and flipped past the scrawled warnings, past the panicked entries about staying hidden and avoiding the city. Deeper into the book, the writing changed, became calmer, more organized, detailed. There were lists, names, dates, places, observations, notes about different people labeled with strange terms like potential host and viable line. And diagrams, crude family trees, branches connecting people I'd never heard of, all converging on one point. Me. According to the notebook, I wasn't just a random person swept up into something bigger. I was part of it, from the beginning. Born into a protected bloodline, whatever that meant, preserved through careful interventions, shielded from outside threats. Trained even, though I had no memory of it. And when the risk became too great, when someone started hunting people like me, they had erased me, wiped my memory, hidden me away, given me a new life, a clean slate with strict instructions to never, ever look back. Until now. Until something, or someone, broke through the mental walls they built around me. I found another note, tucked into the back cover of the notebook, written in a frantic hand. If you remember, it's already too late. You'll have to choose. Rejoin the line or disappear forever. Another choice. Another trap, because neither option sounded good. Rejoin what? A cult? A secret organization? Something worse? Or disappear? Abandon everything, everyone, live as a ghost? I stood there in the middle of the cabin, notebook in one hand, rusted pipe in the other, and realized the horrible truth. I wasn't supposed to know any of this. The person I thought I was, the life I thought I had built, was a cover. A fiction. A safety net designed to hold me in place. And now that the net was torn, someone was coming to pull me back in, or to make sure I stayed silent, permanently. I stuffed the notebook back into my bag, heart hammering. Outside, the light was fading. Soon the woods would swallow the cabin in darkness. And I had a feeling that once night fell, I wouldn't be alone out here anymore. I had to move. Now. I sprinted to the door, ripped the chair away, and flung it open. The clearing was empty. The rental car sat where I left it, silent and waiting like a nervous dog. I didn't think. I just ran. I dove into the driver's seat, jammed the keys into the ignition, and peeled out down the dirt road, branches whipping against the sides of the car. The trees closed in around me, thick and black, swallowing the last scraps of daylight. I didn't look back. I didn't have to, because I knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. And whatever was waiting for me down the road, it was already on its way. I didn't drive straight home. Something told me that was the worst thing I could do. If they were tracking me, and by now it felt stupid to assume otherwise, I couldn't lead them back to my apartment, back to my real life, to the people I cared about. So I drove aimlessly, hours, through small towns with boarded-up gas stations, along back roads barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass. The sun set somewhere behind me, and soon the world narrowed down to what I could see in the dim glow of the rental's headlights. Around midnight, I pulled into an empty rest stop. One of those places built decades ago and forgotten, just a few crumbling picnic tables and a rusted vending machine that probably hadn't worked since the 90s. I parked under a dead streetlight and killed the engine. For a while, I just sat there, listening, waiting. But the only sounds were the wind rattling the trees and the soft creak of the car cooling down. I was alone. For now. I grabbed the notebook from the passenger seat and flipped it open, my hands still trembling slightly. I needed to understand. I needed to figure out what the hell had been done to me, and why. Deeper in the journal, past the paranoid warnings and fragmented memories, the entries got clearer, more structured. There were timelines, names, operations, projects. One name kept appearing. The Line. The Line wasn't a group or a place. It was blood. Family trees. Carefully curated. People, like me, were part of something ancient, something protected, something preserved through generations. Not royalty, not wealth. Something else. Something more essential. The journal never spelled it out exactly, but the way it described preservation protocols and line integrity made my skin crawl. They weren't just watching me because I was special. They were protecting something they believed belonged to them. And if anyone, even the subject themselves, threatened the secrecy of the line, they were to be corrected or suppressed. Without hesitation. Without regret. I kept flipping. Another phrase jumped out at me, circled in thick ink. The second anchor. Secure site. Must remain unaware. Second anchor. Secure site. Must remain unaware. Was that me? Had I been some kind of backup? A fallback? Someone they could activate or erase, depending on what they needed? The questions twisted tighter in my gut. Near the very end of the notebook was a rough map, just a few crude lines sketched in pencil. But I recognized the geography. It was the area near the cabin, but deeper into the forest, miles from the dirt road I had taken. A spot marked only by an X, and next to it scrawled in the margins. Burial site. Origin ties severed, anchor sealed. Burial site. Origin ties severed, anchor sealed. My mouth went dry. Whatever they had hidden there, whatever they had buried, it was the key. To everything. To who I was. To why they had erased my memory. Maybe even to what I was supposed to become. I checked my watch. 1:43 a.m. I still had a few hours before dawn, and part of me, the sane part, wanted to wait. To rest, to regroup, but the other part, the part that had been stirred awake after a decade of silence, knew better. If I waited, they'd find me. If I hesitated, they'd close the hole I'd torn open, and I'd vanish back into the lies they'd built around me. This was my only chance. I started the engine, pulled back onto the dark highway, turned toward the forest, toward the burial site, toward the truth. Whatever it was, whatever it cost. Because I wasn't running anymore. Not from them. Not from the past. Not from myself. The dirt road got worse the deeper I drove into the forest. Potholes gave way to ruts. The trees leaned closer, pressing in from all sides. Branches scraped the sides of the rental car with a sound like nails on a coffin lid. Eventually, the road disappeared entirely. Just forest now. Black, endless forest. I killed the engine, left the car tucked behind a stand of trees, and started on foot. Flashlight in hand. Notebook stuffed into my jacket. Following the crude map from the journal, matching the sketchy landmarks, a twisted pine here, a rocky outcrop there, feeling the weight of the woods closing around me. The forest was alive in that restless way it gets just before dawn. Every twig snap, every flutter of wings, every whisper of wind. It all sounded too loud, too close. I kept moving, one step after another, driven by something deeper than fear now, driven by the need to know. It took almost an hour, stumbling through thorns and undergrowth before I found it. A clearing, circular, maybe 20 yards across. At the center, a mound of earth barely visible beneath a carpet of dead leaves and moss, and sticking out of the ground, crooked and half swallowed by time. A metal hatch, rust-eaten, unmarked, exactly where the map said it would be. The burial site, the anchor. I approached slowly, the forest pressing in behind me like a crowd holding its breath. The hatch was heavier than it looked. It took both hands and all my weight to pry it open. It groaned, a deep, awful sound that made my teeth ache, and swung aside with a shudder. A black hole yawned open beneath me. A ladder disappeared into the dark. No light, no sound, just the cold, damp breath of the earth rising up to meet me. For a moment I stood there frozen. This was it. No more clues, no more maps, no more warnings. If I climbed down that ladder, there was no coming back. But deep inside, where the memory of the memory lived, I already knew. I had been here before, long ago, or maybe only yesterday. I swung my legs over the edge and began to descend. The metal rungs were slick with condensation, the air growing colder with each step. 10 feet, 20, 30. At the bottom, my flashlight beam caught concrete walls, slick with damp. A narrow corridor stretched ahead, ending in a heavy door. The door was covered in markings, symbols, some familiar, others that twisted in my brain like half-forgotten dreams. And in the center, a handprint, not painted, burned into the surface, roughly the size of mine. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stepped forward, pressed my hand against the print. For a moment, nothing. Then a deep click echoed through the chamber and the door swung inward. Beyond it was a small room. Sterile, clinical. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing weakly. In the center of the room was a single object. A tank, like a cryogenic chamber. Frost crusted the outside and a thin mist curled along the floor. Inside the tank, through the frost-glazed window, I could just barely see a figure. Human. Still. Sleeping. Or dead. I moved closer, breath fogging the glass. The figure inside was me. Not similar. Not close. Me. Exactly. Same face. Same scar above the eyebrow. Same everything. Perfect. Preserved. Waiting. The realization hit like a hammer blow. I wasn't the original. I was the copy. The insurance policy. The second anchor. Somehow 10 years ago, the line, whoever they were, had made a choice. Preserve the bloodline. At all costs. When the threat came, when the real me was endangered, they had pulled me out. Wiped my mind. Built a new life around me. A decoy. A safeguard. Meanwhile, the original, the true carrier of whatever they deemed so important, was sealed away here. Frozen. Hidden. Waiting for the right moment to be reawakened. The notebook's final warning echoed in my skull. You'll have to choose. Rejoin the line or disappear forever. It was clear now what that meant. They didn't need two of me. Only one. And if they had found the cabin, if they knew I had remembered, it was only a matter of time before they came to correct the mistake. Before they came to choose which one of us would continue, and which one would be erased. I stood there for a long moment, staring at my own frozen face. The weight of it all settling on my shoulders. The lies, the theft of my own life. The horror of realizing that even now, after everything, I was still just a piece on someone else's chessboard. Above me, somewhere in the forest, I heard the faint crunch of footsteps. Voices, getting closer. The line had found me. I had maybe minutes, maybe less. I looked at the tank. At the keypad next to it. One button, activate, one decision. One life. One truth. I reached out. Not because I trusted them. Not because I accepted their purpose. But because after everything they'd done to me, I deserved to be the one who chose. Not them. Not the line. Me. My fingers hovered over the button. The voices grew louder, closer, urgent. I closed my eyes. Took a deep breath. And chose.